looking forward to an engaged session. I will tell you 2 lines about Sentech and then allow my panelists to introduce themselves under the topic of distribution services, fourth industrial revolution, and the future of South Africa. We are from a company called Sentech, where we pride ourselves with our achievements. We've got 7 consecutive clean audits, and we are a broadcasting digital signal distribution company. And amongst other things, we also contribute to our communities in terms of connectivity. We are not able to cover as much as we would love to due to budgetary constraints and some human capital constraints. However, with what we have, we do stretch, and we are looking at expanding our capabilities in Africa, and we hope through these engagements we'll be able to gather information and know how we can carry Sentech and the country to the next level. I would like to hand over to my panelists to share their names, and then I will come back for them to give us a brief of the engagement.
Morning, everybody. My name is Yoko Kwanza. I'm from a company called BroadSmart. What we do is we build solutions, mainly focused on the broadcasting and media industry, but we're a technology company that also does system integration. So we play in the area of streaming services, we play in the area of portals of apps. So we're generally building solutions, but focused a lot on the media and broadcasting industry.
Good morning. My name is Nomahlubi, Ogoh. I'm the head of IT at Sentech, and I'm excited that we've worked very closely with Broadlink to actually stream GovTech through OTT platform. So streaming via, if you use the likes of Showmax and Netflix. So Broadlink was in partnership with us through AWS as well to stream that. And also, just to talk about Sentech, is that we have just launched e-health and e-learning last week during AfriCom. So those are the great initiatives that we're working on that talks into 4IR and also on bridging the digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Koleka Lwana. I am from an NPO called the Do Good Circle. We operate in the skills development area, and we pay particular focus on the fourth industrial revolution and coding and robotic skills for our youth. We are an outreach that works in rural communities predominantly, and we partner with government agencies and corporate South Africa in order to roll out our programs countrywide. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Kentane. I am from Sentech. And I think it's important to note that we are a digital content delivery company, and we are a state-owned company under the Ministry of Communication and Digital Technology. Our space really is about connectivity, and we are doing quite a bit around that space, and hopefully we will get to a point where we'll be talking about what it is that we're doing in the Internet of Things and the 5G space, and the project we are working on in the Northwest. We are also part of the team that is developing South Africa's own communication satellite to ensure that Africa itself is able to actually transmit using its own resources. We partner quite a bit with the public sector as well as the private sector in ensuring a connected information society. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Aphiwe Adams, and I'm from a company called Omnipresent Global. We are a independent software vendor. We specialize in technologies such as edge computing or ubiquitous computation, computer vision, machine learning, and drone applications. Yep.
Hi everyone, my name is Ndlovu. I'm from a company called Mbula Research and Development. We are a tech startup company that believes that anything that needs to be connected has been connected. So now it's time to bring it to life. As the discussion go on, we'll touch on what are the stuff that we have brought to life through digital platforms, particularly in the area of deaf community.
Thank you. I hope we all realize that in terms of our topic, we do have quite a few limitations, which are not necessarily saying we are not capable of achieving the National Development Plan deliverables. And I hope from the engagements we'll be able to know how to tackle this fourth industrial revolution baby that we are all talking about, and it is in our government interest, and we do have support for small business, and even as Corporate South Africa would like to collaborate with small businesses in order to achieve the objectives and be able to participate at world-class level with these fourth industrial revolution technologies. Some of our limitations is obviously the lack of collaboration between small business and corporate business, whereby we know the outcry of small business, and unfortunately I'm very passionate about small business, so most of my plea would be, amongst all these discussions, how do we walk or carry our small business in all these tasks that we are so eager to achieve. We also note the skills gap that we have in the country. Not necessarily we do not have. We may have to reskill some other capabilities or reinvent new skills to be able to be ready for this fourth industrial revolution. And also, I believe one of our limitations is the education system that we have, because at this stage, I believe it's not ready to produce the skills capability that is required for the next jobs. Another big limitation is the collaboration between academia and business. But I would like us to leave this room with where to from here and how to. I also believe that if we read, the World Economic Forum has also touched on Africa's capability in terms of skills. Are we ready? The world is leapfrogging to 5G. Where are we as a country? Are our technologies ready to enable smart cities around our country, in our communities? The challenges that we highlight every day, that we see on our media, what are we as business doing? Maybe we don't have the money, but I believe we have the money, but it's how we use it or how we distribute it amongst ourselves. I will allow the panel to share their notes or knowledge, and from the panel info, then we can take questions and answers and comments and input. And as I had requested, we should leave here with where to from here and how. I will request the gentleman, Wanda, to start and take us through. As you can see, I am favorable to gender. My panel, I tried to balance it and include SMMEs. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Well, I mean, everybody talks about fourth industrial revolution, and we talk about all these concepts around robotics, e-commerce platforms, coding. But I just want to share something that as a company, we are excited about these opportunities. And we believe that with this new wave of technologies, it does bring opportunities to address some of the NDP goals. However, there are two aspects that motivate our company to exist. Is to look at, in the wave of the new technologies, how do we ensure that we address inclusion and diversity? Our focus is on our deaf community. I mean, deaf communities, they are often excluded in this new wave of technologies. So now the big question is, how do we, as a tech startup, play a significant role in addressing some of the NDP goals in terms of inclusion. One of our focus is skill development. We do train deaf youth, also with the consideration that deaf people, some of them, they don't complete matric, and the level of literacy is very low. So with these opportunities in the fourth industrial revolution, we believe that companies in the tech space, while they are developing their own solutions, whether it's drones or it's coding, it's important to bring people living with disability. And we've done so as a company. In the past 3 years, we have brought on board 64 deaf people. And we go beyond just training, because training is one thing, you empower someone with a skill. But as a country, we're faced with unemployment. So now how do you then utilize skill to pursue opportunities? Our focus as a company is then to say, you've got a skill now as a deaf person in the country that is excluded from other opportunities. How can you then now, if we give you an opportunity of being employed at this company, at our company, how do you then use technology to develop solutions that will address the exclusion and improve the inclusion of people living with disability? Last year, together with the deaf youth, we then we identify an opportunity within the wave of new technology. How can we use coding to solve the problem between speaking people and non-speaking people? Because a skill should able to alert that individual with opportunities around them, right? We interrogated their thinking capability that look beyond being deaf. How can you use the skill? So one of the challenges that we identify with them was you have at least 4 million people that are deaf in South Africa, whether it's caused by age or it's a medical problem or any other reasons. Then how do we then bridge the gap between speaking and non-speaking using coding? Because now you've got a skill. We developed a platform called RIA, which is available on Android, right? And it prides me that while we are looking at the concept of fourth industrial revolution, new technologies, what is happening on the ground? And as a company, we always ask ourselves that, yes, government can define policies, but as a startup, what role can you play? So it pride ourselves that this year, together with the deaf people that has been empowered in coding and to take opportunities in the fourth industrial revolution, the team of 6 deaf people, through coding skill, they developed this solution, and we launched it in June, right? So now, the question that I will then put forward to anyone who is working, whether it's in a policy space or you are in a tech space, let's look beyond the discussion of fourth industrial revolution. Ask yourself as a company, what are you doing to address the NDP goals, particularly the inclusion and diversity of bringing those that are excluded by the system and the opportunities? And I think I'll leave my discussion right there.
Thank you. You can continue, sir.
Okay. Can I talk while sitting? I'm going to talk for a very long time. Kidding. As I mentioned, I'm from a company called Omnipresent Global. We have our views are a little bit different in terms of what the NDP should look like. So I'm just going to talk about why we exist initially. So the company exists, our company vision is to create a utopia world, not a better world, a utopia world. We want ideal, not 2 more slices of bread, but we want the best. So we believe we can accomplish this through technology. And I think this has been proven if you look at organizations like Amazon, where 4IR is being actually implemented. So we believe 4IR is automation and AI. If you're not automating, if you're not having some level of intelligence, then you're not for IR, right? That's our belief. So we believe this can be accomplished, the utopia world, through this. One of the concepts which we staunch believer in or supporter of is concepts such as UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, where there's things like automation tax, which will happen to companies that automate more, which will leave a lot more money for the state to then subsidize people's income. As well as we believe this the impact of this is twofold, because with automation, there are studies that suggest 42%, 45% reduction in jobs. I think it would be worse personally, because we've seen the impacts of automation with some of our clients that we work with. One of our clients, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention them, it's an American organization, but we are predicting to reduce their operational expenses by 46%. So this is the future. It's gonna happen, whether we like it or not. I believe these companies are highly incentivized to implement these things from a driving perspective, in terms of self-driving cars, to a your maintenance industry, whereby you can apply techniques such as computer vision to perform an audit on a piece of infrastructure. And the technologies are there, some of the technologies which we're working on. So essentially, I think the question around jobs, I think as a nation we're looking at it a little bit different, or personally I believe wrong. I don't think there's going to be more jobs. I think there's going to be less. And I think we need to start worrying about the anxiety that's going to come with this. So there's economies that have boomed in the past 2 to 3 years, like the gig economy. It's worth $50 billion a year, where companies like Google take a portion of their machine learning and they dump it in poorer countries like Kenya, where now there's anxiety in the first world country because your computer scientists, I think they let go of 100 of them last year, because you really don't need them. You can use 2 of those guys and then have the training done by people you pay $2 a day, essentially. So, I think that we should be having also a psychological conversation to say, how do we curb the anxiety that's going to come with automation? And also, I think if we can do that, we can ease digital transformation into organizations, because sometimes you build a system. We've done some work with Transnet, and there's no adaptation because people are thinking it's going to replace their jobs, and it makes it very difficult for us to actually help the state. So I think the conversation ideally we should start thinking about that, to say, well, we might get to a stage where we have a utopia world where your basic needs are covered, and the means of doing this is, possibly automating state-owned enterprises, where we're left with a lot more money. You look at Transnet, for example, they're making close to 70 billion plus, and most of it is spent on operational expenses. If you look at the annual financial statements and you look at the property reevaluation, how much they're losing there, 7 billion just because we don't have visibility. We don't know what's happening with our infrastructure. And these are things where most of the technology already exists. I think it's just an appetite and a belief in terms of how can we, implement these things. So that's really my view. I see I'm running out of time. I wanted to spend another hour, but that's just my view.
Okay, thank you, Aphiwe. Before I hand over to Melissa, I think, Aphiwe, the anxiety is now for us. That transformation in technology is happening now. We're talking reskilling, we're talking robotics, we're talking Internet of Things. It's now. If you look at South Africa, technological transformation is here. Are we ready to adopt? What's going to happen to the matriculant that's writing exams now? Are they ready? Are our universities embracing these learners and gearing them for the future? Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you. I think I want to kick off with just having these discussions. And I think it's very important for us to keep in mind that we may be a panel here, but we don't have the solutions, and that's why we engage everyone and we all sit together. Because we're bringing forward what we think are some of the challenges, and we want together to find possible solutions, and I think that's the first thing. The second thing is we gather at these gatherings such as Vision 2030 and really the National Development Plan, and I believe that these Vision 2030 conferences should be feeding into the execution initiatives or strategies of the National Development Plan, because we are discussing possible solutions. We've got a decade left before 2030. Now, how are we accelerating this? And I think the NDP is a very important, I think, strategy or plan. And the vision we set, because one of our greatest challenges as a country, we still have the highest Gini coefficient, which is a challenge. Our unemployment rate is extremely high, and we talk about the economy. If people are unemployed, then we cannot talk about how we can improve the economy, because we need people who are going to be part of the existing workforce. Now, once we start talking about the fourth industrial revolution, I believe that it's important for us to contextualize it as a country. We cannot say that we are going to implement the way that I'll say the first world is implementing, and that's what I'll call it, because our challenges at home are very different from those challenges, and if we do not take that into cognizance, then we will be failing ourselves as a nation, and I do not see any improvement in that economy. Now, one of the things is basic services. How are we using technology to actually meet the basic needs of our society? We have to be realistic with the fact that we have, we as a country, we may be first world in some instances, but we're very much third world in majority, and those are the things that we need to address. And we talk about connectivity, we talk about intelligent connectivity, we talk about access to information. And it's critical, it's important, yes, but we must also utilize that to bridge this digital divide we keep talking about between rural and urban. We also need to go back to the basics, and I keep stressing the issue of rural development, because we have what we call internal migration as a nation. We focus on migration and immigration, etc. externally. People are moving from the Eastern Cape, from Limpopo, from KwaZulu-Natal, from Mpumalanga, and we're coming to Joburg because we say that's where the money is. How do we then use this very technology that we're talking about to develop industry within those rural communities, within those provinces in the Eastern Cape, in KwaZulu-Natal, in the Northwest? And those are some of the things that I believe we should be looking at as a country. We look at our investment rating, we got a scare. We're not out, we're not in the clear yet. And this downward spiral is a concern for us. And the impact, obviously, it has on the South African economy. From my side, given one of the things we touched on earlier is upskilling, and we need to talk about our education system, which you mentioned. We were at Vision 2030 last year, and we touched on education, and we repeatedly touch on education. And the meme on learning about the thorax on the locust and what it did for me in this current point in time, I still don't understand. So how do we look at our curriculum? And we can't keep talking about the education system and the curriculum, and this does not get to the powers that be, and that's what I'll call it. So this platform has to be able to filter up, or rather to move up and feed into the bigger plan. We are not going to move as a country until we start it at the early development level. So when we start talking about the early development curriculum, early childhood, I apologize, and how we are preparing our children to be the people that are able to compete in this global economy. And I think those are some of the things we need to touch on, given the education system and upskilling, but also we need to talk about contextualizing this 4IR in technology development and how we make it work for a country. And I believe that the regulatory environment plays a very key role in how we actually do that, from the development of our policies to the actual implementation of those policies, in order for it to impact us and for us not to follow what other people are doing, but to actually look at solutions that are actually going to work for this country.
Thank you. As I said earlier, just to remind you, my name is Koleka from the Do Good Circle. We are an NGO that focuses on bridging the gap, the digital gap, focusing on coding training. We actually started this project because we used to work closely with an organization is in the fleet management space. And they realized earlier than most of the companies that were caught at the last hour in the country a few years ago, that they needed to change their fleet management system. And they went with Microsoft Aerodynamics, cost the company millions. And a lot of people lost their jobs because with this new system, they did not need, a couple of the business streams. And at that time, it caused a lot of panic. And when we were looking for a skill within talking to employment agencies in the country, we didn't have enough, to employ. We ended up hiring young people from other countries, India, China, and so that program was run by a whole lot of international experts. Fast forward, we now have an NGO called the Do Good Circle, which was set up with the Mandela Foundation purely because the foundation has an interest in education. As we know that the old man, that was part of his passion. And we started doing research in the Eastern Cape, and we learned that as much as there's a lot of talk about there's lots of people that go to government agencies, to corporate South Africa to get funding under the pretext of assisting our youth with digital training. But when you actually zoom in, there is still a big gap out there. I'm actually not sure. It's almost as if they've hardly scratched the surface. So because we're an outreach and we operate in the Eastern Cape, we realize that even the TVET colleges do not offer this kind of skill. They do not really get into coding. So we use their facility because via the Mandela Foundation, we have signed an agreement with TVET colleges that we are going to assist them on the side. So we work with some of the students that are part of their system, and we also work with those that are outside, and we use their rooms to do training either after hours or on weekends. And we start with basic things like creative thinking, because we understand that the way the future is designed and this wave of the fourth industrial revolution, you gotta be smarter than a machine because robots are taking over. So what do you have as a human being? You actually have a mind, you have a brain that you can use to try and outdo a robot. So we focus on those things. Let's look at your cognitive thinking abilities. Let's look at your creative, thinking. How do you solve problems? So we work a lot with youth that seem to, have that kind of strength. And after we've done our assessments, we then start doing actual training. So we get our geeks, we call them do-good geeks. They start working through solving this problem with them. Our scope, or rather scale, at the moment, things are happening quite slow because everything is related to budgets. We are talking to corporate companies and asking them to come on board to support our project. we are fortunate to sit on, we work closely with the commission that the president set up at the end of last year, the Commission for the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the Minister of Communication. And so from that side, there is a will. The Minister of Babesway Internet is very passionate about the space, so she holds our hand. And most of the time, even when we go to talk to corporate companies, she actually does endorse us. For instance, we are talking to Huawei and we're saying, you are in the country, what are you doing? You need to assist our people with connectivity, because if people have connection and data, then we can actually be able to roll out our coding program in most of the, outskirts, underlying areas in South Africa. We are hoping that even as companies are shedding, we have this example of Standard Bank having closed 90 branches, and when we spoke to them a month ago, they were going to close more. So the problem is there. Companies are no longer needing the skills that there is. That's why there's a gap. And people at school are not being taught what is needed or the future needs. So we need to step up quickly and address that. And this is not only happening to South Africa, it's a global phenomenon. But if we look at Africa, the rest of Africa, we do seem to be lagging behind. And we just need to move quicker. We need to not allow policies and red tapes to hinder the progress, because the world is moving at an alarming rate. This is the era of robotics. I go to my pharmacy, a robot is picking up medicine from the cabinet and brings it closer to me. So in the long run, probably the human skill is going to be needed to do something else, but not to dispense the medicine. So when we talk to young people in these rural communities, after we've done training with them, we show them these things and we say, you can now develop an app that will assist. You can do, for instance, one of our students, a cohort team from our class recently, they designed a lift club. So now they can start matching people in their community, because in the Eastern Cape, people rely a lot on hitchhiking and that kind of thing. And I think we're just an organization that's working with companies and government agencies that have a passion for the fast-moving world of the Internet of Things, robotics, and we're quite excited and we have much energy and we're fluid. We're constantly changing even our scope. We are part of the Cisco network, so we use part of their content as ours, and we are working with the Ict Sector because they themselves need to be geared up for accreditation. They're trying to figure things out as they go, and we are walking the journey with them as well as the members of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Ndlovu?
Okay. Good morning. Nomahlubi Ogoh. I'm at Sentech. I'm head of IT. So I'm actually going to start from where Given has asked question to say where to from here and how. I do believe that as a country, we do have people that are capable to do what needs to be done. We're really taking ourselves for granted. We're not having conversations or forums whereby people come, startups, individuals, and say, I can do this. How about we brainstorm and actually look at the pain points and fix it? Instead, we want to go out onto the market, go to international companies and say, Microsoft, please can you help me with this? We are not actually having those frank conversations to say, let's check internally first. And if that fails, let's go external. We're talking about smart cities. We're talking about IoT. We're talking about connected devices. One of the questions that Gartner asked was, who's going to own the network? The CEO, Mlamli, said to me on Monday, Ndlovu, Google says they're building that pipe all the way to Africa. And I'm not happy. Because what that means is that if we're going to have over 200 billion connected devices, your cell phone, your fridge, that smart screen, my gate at home, everything, including the tech that you're going to put on our children so that they don't get stolen. All of these devices are going to be connected. And if Google owns the network, it means that money, that moolah is going to go out of South Africa, out of Africa, to the States. Is it the state we want to be at? Because if that is the state we're going to be at, we're going to have this conversation 10 years later and say, oopsie, the jobs are getting lost. But we are not creating that together. Businesses are pointing out to public sector is pointing out to business. Can we just stop with the jargon and let's just start executing? And let's have those frank conversations. And let's be quite possessive with regard to the core capabilities that we need and non-negotiable should be South African based. So I had a privilege. Over the weekend, I visited the Kingdom Life Orphanage through Sowing Seed. And the gentleman there, very young gentleman, he's been there with Kingdom Life for quite some years now. It's based in Aphiwe. So we walked through that and he said, look, we've got a computer lab. I said, what do you do here? He said he's training the orphans now how to use computers. They search, how to search the network, how to play games, etc. And I was actually disturbed because I'm just sowing seed, but is that relevant seed that I'm sowing at Kingdom Life? Because if I have the skills, why can't I bring up my network if I don't have the time to teach these kids coding, to teach them the critical skills? I mean, we talked about cognitive flexibility, being adaptable, being flexible, and being aware of your environment. Because being aware of your environment helps us to actually fix the pain points. So we're so focused now, we've just gone now to so-called middle class, we've forgotten about paying it forward. And paying it forward, it means as a head, as an executive, as a manager, as a skilled person, wherever you are, how do we have those conversations to say, as Standard Bank, as whoever, this network should be owned by South Africa, and this is how we're going to enable it. Because those billions of devices that are going to go outside of the country through connected, that means the data is going to be owned elsewhere, and data is king. So do you want our South African data now or African data to be going elsewhere? The other thing I wanted to talk about, which I'm very passionate about, I'm not going to mention the service provider, is that in my excitement as purely being an enterprise architect, I visited one of our big service providers, not general service provider, but one of the cloud service providers in the country. And I walked in the passages, and all I saw was non-South Africans. I was very excited about the technology. My spirit sank. So I engaged the likes of AWS as well because they had a conversation with me, so I'm quite privileged because then we have this conversation. And I said, what is your drive? What are the socio-economic things that you're doing to help us in our country? If I see Zuch, then as a head of IT, should I be even having the conversation with these service providers? Really, we can't. I like the millennials, they say, we can't deal. So when I walk on those passages, my heart just sank and I said, I can't deal. Because seriously, I can't deal. Because if you're going to be bringing people every 2 months, 3 months just to sort out the visa so that they can be here and deploy the solutions and no regard to our skills that we need to uplift this economy, these communities that you're investing supposedly, and I'm putting inverted marks because I didn't see South Africans there, then I'm really worried about the type of partnership I'm going to have with you as a service provider. So I really want to talk about that. And lastly is the privilege of having engaged a center called Whisper Speech and Hearing Center. And this, I'm talking about capabilities because that touches on that, is that in that school, some of the kids, it was the first time for them having to hear a sound and the beauty thereof. How many of our kids in the township are disregarded? Or even in our homes there that are disregarded, they say, they're too deaf. And it's not because of that deaf, it's because of accessibility, inclusion, We don't have those special schools in early development centers in the townships, in the rural areas, in all these other areas that could actually help and let the kids be able to hear, to write for the first time ever in their lives. I mean, as a parent, personal experience is that I've got a maths genius, but because he couldn't speak very well, he was written off from a normal crèche. But then I have to sacrifice my salary to train my child. What about other people? Can they afford that? So these are the conversations, because if you're going to talk about skills, accessibility for those type of skills should be relevant, should be there in those respective areas, in those remote areas. With Sentech rolling out e-health and e-learning, it's just at a much higher surface of it. We need to delve deep down. We need to go into those homes. We need to have those technical skills being embedded. If somebody is not a studious person, they should learn then how to do certain other skills, because people have talent, and let's not write them off. So, as my last remark, who are you partnering with? Are you just talking SMME? Are we just bluffing? If I'm having interns or new people, I'm going to write them off and say, they're unskilled, who's going to skill them? And if you're going to be possessive about your job, as a head of IT, I think I had that conversation internally, is that you need to get over it. It is changing. Stop owning titles. Let's move forward. Let's have really conversations that move us forward. So that's my closing remark. Thank you.
Thank you. A bit emotional there. Let's just leave it there. Over to you.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll take over from one of the things that Ndlovu mentioned, which has to do, I think, with the nature of the country and the continent that we live in. So we are, unfortunately, I think, still the most disadvantaged continent. So when we talk about what's coming in the digital revolution, we are always going to be at a big disadvantage. We're not going to be able to compete with the West, with the East, so we do have to realize that we also have to focus on other strengths. And I think that's the area that we play in, is that whilst we're a technology company, we have recognized that there is a lot of value in being able to provide digital platforms for the creative industries. Right now, we do have a challenge that a lot of people come out of school with, if you can call it, subpar maths and science skills, which are not really competitive in the global environment. But we know that a lot of people within the country do have other talents that they can utilize, and that if not competitive, on globally, but at least on the continent. You know that if you look at, our creative skills, whether it is in music, whether it's in, video, in content, those things are really very strong areas for the country. And I think what we have tried to achieve with the kind of projects that we take on is really to make those platforms accessible to this wealth of creative industry that we've got in the country. So in the old environment, you would have, all these people who have got, skills in producing films, producing, programs, now wanting to sell their content to the likes of the SABC. That situation has changed. The SABC has got financial problems, but also, more importantly, content from outside is flooding into the country. And so the competition is not just to get your content bought by the SABC, it's also how do you ensure that your content can compete against what's on YouTube, what's on Netflix, what's on all these other platforms that are coming into the country. So we do have a big challenge that we've got a growing creative industry with people who are talented in that regard, but they can't compete. So you have this challenge that people can now go and start uploading their content to things like YouTube. But as Ndlovu said, the problem is when you upload your content there, you lose ownership of your content. Number two, the content that gets promoted on platforms like YouTube is not really, is not local friendly. So you get lost in that. And so it becomes more and more difficult for people who are in that kind of industry to make money. You look at things like the streaming services for music. Everybody now is getting Spotify for free. The music that they tend to listen to there is what's promoted by Spotify. And that tends to be music coming from outside. So you've got all these artists who are going to, they thought it was tough, but 5 years from now, it's going to be even tougher. So the main problem is that we don't have our own platforms. The platforms that we have are very limited. So you take a look at Showmax. Showmax has got, maybe 70% international content, 30% local. It's really one of the only platforms that focuses on local content. We are doing a project in Botswana where the Botswana government has said, look, we want to make sure that we protect our local creative industry. So they have gone and invested in developing their own streaming platforms, né, which are focused only on pushing local content. Here, with a lot more money than we have in Botswana, you don't find that kind of active intervention by government yet. né? Hopefully it will come. But I do think that if we really look at a holistic strategy, it can only be about technical skills. We need to make sure that we look at all of the strengths that we have as a continent and as a country, and try and make sure that we try and create equal opportunity for all of the different types of skills that we have in the country. We as a tech company, we will play our part in making sure that we can develop the kind of platforms that are easily accessible, that are low cost, that allow people to also make their content sustainable, because you need to make money in order to keep making content. So I think, if there's one comment I would like to share, is just to say that in this new area, I think also we shouldn't forget the non-technical side, because I think it does offer a lot of opportunity for people who won't get space within, the new digital skill sets.
Thank you. I'm sure we have had quite a few inputs. We have touched on youth, rural communities, skills platforms, disabilities, and as well as soft skills. I would like to hear your thoughts on the topic. Let us appreciate the work that is being done by our SMMEs, and I'm sure we would engage further on Koleka with the NGO initiatives that she's rolling out, and her engagement and collaboration with the 4IR Commission, together with the Eastern Cape TVT colleges. And I'm sure out of this room, you will be able to engage with someone who will be able to reinforce or redirect and take your initiatives in terms of skills development further. And I'm sure we did underline Wanda saying they have developed an app. I would like you to go into that app and see the beauty of it, and appreciate that it was developed by disabled youth. Our music, as we have heard, the millennials have a different language. They listen to different music as well. And even our kids now, I'm sure we all are aware, they are way advanced. So I'm one of those people who need to be reskilled, Koleka, and Ndlovu, and Wanda. And I'm sure we can together make it. I would like to share your thoughts on the topic and maybe questions. May I start on my right-hand side of the room? I will take 2 questions on the right, 2 questions on the left, please. You are noted.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for your comments. I think it's very interesting and quite encouraging to see there's lots of people heading down the right path. I'm from Coheso Trust, and socioeconomic development is key to what we're trying to do, and education is central to socioeconomic development. I think sometimes we can get a bit symptomatic about how we try and solve the problems. And I think we need to go back to the root cause of where the obstacle is. And in our work, and we're working in the Eastern Cape at the moment, piloting a project, interesting, noting that you're also in the Eastern Cape. But we must understand that we're talking about socio-economic development. So we're looking for people to be extracted from poverty, and using the fourth industrial revolution as a vehicle to extract from poverty. So we need to go back to the agencies that are responsible for local economic development, and to try and change the thought leadership and the mindset of people that are influencing local economies. And I think one of the big things that's missing in all our towns, we spoke about rural development. It's amazing, we're working in Makana at the moment, and it's been quite interesting that the stakeholders have a very similar objective, prosperity for all communities. However, they're a circular firing squad. So they keep shooting each other, and it becomes a destructive process instead of a collective, cohesive process driving development in the region for the region, and with equitable distribution of that opportunity. So we must be very cognizant of the fact that if we're going to expect people to adopt opportunity of the fourth industrial revolution, that we've actually got to give them an opportunity to prepare themselves for that. And we can only expect people to adopt these new ideas and approaches if their minds are ready for that. And it goes back to education. We can't wait for the education system to change before these opportunities are taken advantage of. Connectivity is a major problem in all these areas, but we need to find ways of bypassing the education system and creating excitement around opportunities associated with the fourth industrial revolution. So I think in the Mekana, sorry to carry on so long, but in the Mekana case or pilot project, we found that the minute there's cohesive stakeholder forums and clusters developed around local economic development linked to academia and started to talk about how to farm in water-scarce environments using technology or etc., and anything else related to technology, we find that there's tremendous momentum that builds. And it's only at that point that we can engage the youngsters and start sucking them into the programs and linking ethical leadership to that process. Thanks.
Thank you for your input. I'll take the next hand on the right hand. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Colin Komazi from Kutwano. Thank you so much, all of you, for your inputs. I think it is very, very important that we have got people like yourselves who are thinking about the future of this country. During the presentation there in the main hall from the Statistics SA, it was highlighted that the biggest drivers of poverty is unemployment and education. And if I look at the NDP Vision 2030, for us to be able to realize some of the goals, we need to make it a point that there is a lot that is going to be done around unemployment and education. And with the services that you have been talking about, that you are providing, how do you think those services can assist in accelerating the alleviation of poverty? Because my belief is that if ever we are having a country that is full of poverty, you can't grow an economy with a poor country. So I just want to understand in terms of your services, because for me, the majority of the poor people are in the remote areas, and I think some of you have alluded to that fact. How will these services try to accelerate alleviating poverty, especially in those areas? Because my belief is that if we can be able to deal with those remote areas in one way or the other, we'll be educating the nation, because those people are not educated. You are talking about people who are even afraid to use the ATM, thinking that the only way for them is to have hard cash all the time. So in terms of technology, because I think there is a role that it can play in terms of assisting reaching those goals of the NDP. Thank you.
Before you hand over the mic, may I flip the coin? How do you see yourself making this impact in exactly what you're asking?
Okay, you want me to respond now?
Please go ahead.
Okay. I heard Melissa, I think she was talking a lot about curriculum, the education part, because for me, I think there is a correlation between education and unemployment. And if we can address the education aspect, educating our people around the new skills that will enable them to be entrepreneurs, because you remember from that statistics, there is a lot of people who are working every day and then they are doing nothing. So now, if we can be able to come up with some form of technology maybe apps whatsoever, that will reduce that number of those people who are working every day and do nothing. But at the same time, in our education system, we also need to make it a point that we address the issue of skills within the education system, especially around the teaching. Because I can tell you, you can't have any education system that is going to succeed if ever the quality of teaching is not addressed. You need to do it there, because the kids that we are talking about, whether they are at primary, whether they are at secondary, whether you are talking about people at TVET, you need to make it a point that you have got the right people in the classrooms. You improve your quality of education in order to improve outcomes. That is the only way that you can be able to do. Thank you.
Okay, I first want to also just respond for the Kagiso Trust to say a relevant point on IoT to assist, for example, the farmers to be able to know when to sow the seed, when to harvest, what is the soil supposed to be. So Sentech, with the 5G rollout plan that they have in place, is to also put those IoT capabilities and enable that. And what we're looking at is that we're also looking at last mile, because the conversations that you're going to have with the service providers, they're going to say, if you look at the rural areas, they're non-profitable areas. So they don't actually invest there. Instead, they'll just do it because of government says they should do. And once the period is done, they'll actually pick up the equipment and go. So that is what the capabilities that we're looking into rolling out with our broadband services. And secondly, so I really appreciate your comments also, and it still touches on skills and education. That's very key. And also about your question about how do we alleviate poverty, it also is in line with what you mentioned. Fortunately for us, we have given, and with regard to our key performance indicators from an enterprise supplier development, is that the guys internally are driven to make sure that they do ESD. And not only that, it's not just to train the suppliers, but to also give them opportunities in the localized environment. If we're having a project in KZN, who are the service providers in those KZN environment that we can use to actually help us with our capabilities? So we're not a talk shop, but we're implementing those. And obviously, there's always room for improvement. Secondly, on education, as I mentioned earlier, at Africom, we've launched e-learning. What is awesome about e-learning, it's a blended learning approach. You know, you still have to have a teacher teaching the kids. But what is awesome about it is that it's electronic learning. Let's not get fancy about it, because when you talk e-learning, we talk about platform. But if you talk about learning, is that you give people access to so much vast other resources that they could tap into. You know, so kids in the most rural and disadvantaged areas is that they don't know those capabilities. Hence the orphanage is saying, I'm teaching the people to go to Google, do the searches and all of that. That is also electronic learning. So with us deploying e-learning with the tablets, with the smart boards, whatever case may be, is that also on top of that is that they have access now to other added resources that are specific for that training. And also, it depends on the learners, well, their drive to learn is that they could also search through other means for themselves as part of their way of, let me upskill myself. It is going to be a process. I mean, when you introduce e-learning, it's also a shocker for people that have never used electronic devices. First, the teachers, the principals, and then to the learners themselves. Actually, kids are very quick if they have access to those devices. So it is going to be a process. That is why it's very key that it's also blended. You can't do e-learning without facilitation approach and without upskilling your facilitators, which is your teachers in this sense. So we are doing that. We're rolling it out. Other conversations, however, we need to take it up with our stakeholders, which is Department of Education. Sorry. Is what we are doing still relevant from a curriculum perspective? You know, I was watching Facebook movie on Netflix yesterday. Those guys have access to all of these beautiful things. Our kids don't have that. They should just be able to give them that accessibility of those things. That's why inclusion is important. You know, so we are starting that, we are doing something about it. But it also costs money to do that. And I'm taking it back to you. What seed are you sowing as well in your own respective townships, rural areas? Because we also need to do something about it, because you're getting learned, but you're leaving others behind, and you're happy to be driving your BMW or at least people like Kaya, they can't do anything because we're not empowering them either. So we all have to.
Thank you. I will take 2 questions. I'll take the gentleman and the gentleman. I will come back with a round. Don't worry, the next round is females only.
Yeah, this is the gentleman named Itumele. I'm also from Sentech. I just want to really appreciate the panel and just to encourage them also on what they've been saying. Just to say that, I mean, I've noted what, is it Aina? Wanda. On the challenge that we're posing in terms of bridging the digital divide, inclusion of deaf people, and I would extend it to other disabilities, and also put the challenge to say what other technologies can we begin to look at to bridge other disabilities. And you mentioned about 46 or 4 million deaf people, and you have reached how many? 64. So you can see it's still a long journey. And I think I've noted Melissa has painted the socio-economic context of unemployment and the inequalities, which is important that whatever we do, it should relate to that. And my colleagues, I think, Ndlovu and Melissa have talked about that. I think Ndlovu have spoken. I think you have spoken about a lot of things, the core capabilities, the cry about the global people, the platforms that come to South Africa. But for me, I'm just want to challenge ourselves to say we are in the global world, and we need to begin to think global. People say think global, act local, but I'm saying think global and act globally, starting here in Africa. And my biggest concern is that I know we will be sort of crying and moaning about unemployment and skills, all those challenges. But I'm beginning to challenge even the panelists, our entrepreneurs. I think here we've got economic and social entrepreneurs. Koleka, I would say you are a social entrepreneur. And my question for our entrepreneurs is that, what would it take you to scale? That is to go big, to go global. Yoko, that is my question for you. What would it take you, or what support can we give, to people like you? Because I'm thinking we want you to become the Netflix of tomorrow, the Googles of tomorrow, coming from Africa. So I'm just challenging our thinking to say, let's begin to think globally. Let's act globally. Let's try to partner. So I know your concern, but shouldn't we begin to partner even with those global partnerships, with those global partners? Owning our platform, we can see how we begin to build partnerships. So for me, that's the issue, to say, shouldn't we begin to think globally and to become part of the global citizens? And I must say, some of us have been privileged to travel and assess the world in the East and West, to say, I'm telling you, people are no longer talking about 4IR. It's only us here, in the south, even Southern Africa. We're excited. They've moved far. There's no talk about 4IR is happening. We see driverless cars, we see Amazon Go and all those things. But I'm just saying, I think you have pointed clearly, Yoko, to say this is the divide, the first and the third world. But we need to begin to do a catch-up. And I'm actually challenging our entrepreneurs to say, guys, we really depend on you. I think organizations like Sentech are really prepared to support you to become global. But we want you to think, to say we need to scale, to say if you have 64, why don't you say we need to reach 500 or 1 million deaf people? I think that is the thinking I'm trying to install. But I think I really appreciate, thank you very much. I don't want to talk a lot, but we really appreciate the panel.
Thank you. We'll take the second.
Okay, my question relates to what you were saying earlier on, that you walked into one of your stakeholders or partners companies, and you realized that there was not one South African employed there. Just wanted to check with you as Sentech, because I mean we understand that South Africa, most of the stuff we are in third world phase, and a lot of this technology will come from companies from elsewhere. What is it that is being done, whether by yourself directly or through help from other departments or government itself, to make sure that there's compliance that needs to be followed in terms of staffing up these businesses that are coming into South Africa to bring this technology? Because if we leave it at that I come from China, I bring my people, and we do this business. When we close shop, we all pack up and go, and nothing is left for South Africans. There's no transfer of skills, there's nothing. So what is it that you guys are doing to make sure that these people are compelled to employ South Africans?
I'm tempted to speak, but I will allow the chosen speakers to do the part.
Given you must also speak, you're one of the chosen speakers. As Uhlubi called us, millennials, it is not an option to say we can't deal. We're going to have to deal because the world requires us to deal. And I think I'm going to touch on some of the issues raised. The gentleman from Kagiso Trust, you spoke about a lot of things. One thing that caught me and that really has bothered me, you spoke about ethical leadership. And I think that's one of the challenges that we do face. Before we start talking about a whole lot of things we need to implement, we've got the issue of, as much as we pour resources, are the resources going to be directed to the right place? And how do we, I'll say, implement consequence management? And I think that's one of the things. If we're looking at our current environment now as a country, we've got a serious issue when it comes to consequence management and how we hold people to account. And that is one of the things that we really need to touch on. I'm calling from Kutlanong. I think Kutlanong is an education center. That is what I will call it. And I think one of the things that I would pose back to you is, what are you doing to be constantly adapting your own curriculum and the education you're providing to our children to keep up with the current trends and the direction that the world is going? Because we can't carry education in the way that we used to do it, where the curriculum takes I don't know how many years to develop, and we keep the curriculum for 25 years. If you look at our classroom structure, I think it speaks to the second industrial revolution, where people were taught to operate in a factory format, that it moves from here and then it moves from here and it moves from here. And those are some of the things that you can address in your space, because you are not bound by that environment. I believe that you have the power to actually do that in your own specific environment. Now, we're talking about how do we, I was very impressed with what Wanda was saying. Thank you, Ndlovu, because he's talking about the 64 deaf learners. I think you've got 64, not learners, sorry, and entrepreneurs that they are working with. If each and every one of us in this room would actually make that one contribution, I honestly believe that we can actually change the situation. Hlubi was talking about us being comfortable driving our BMW. Sorry, I'm a Merc fan, driving our Mercs, so being content, but actually looking at the next person. So if each of us did that 64, we could actually reach that 4 million that Itumeleng from Sentech was talking about. By the way, Itumeleng is the executive responsible for socioeconomic development and enterprise development at Sentech, so you can grab him at any point in time after the session if you want any of the partnerships. But I just want to close with the fact that we each have to do what we can in our own environments, and that is where it starts. I do apologize, but I'm going to touch in my other life. There's something called the National Press Club, and as an executive in the National Press Club, we had decided that we are going to train journalists on the digital environment and how to access information, how to sift information. We've got disinformation issues. So in your own corner, how are you actually contributing to actually developing the people within your space? I apologize, Given.
May I take the last round of female questions? I did declare. Please protect me, audience. I did declare it was going to be females. In the interest of time, may I please take all questions? I'm going to have to cut out the closing remarks. And I see there's a burning gentleman that wants to speak. And I will make an informed decision after the 4 ladies have asked questions. Your question, sir, was not answered. I'm coming back. I'm just looking at time and trying to say, can we take the 4 ladies? And I will not, unfortunately, have time for you to have your closing remarks. The question was, in terms of skills that are in the country that are not local, what are we doing? Is there skills transfer that is happening? What is it that we are doing to ensure that we can have skill in our country? Am I correct? How what is it been done? The multinationals to do skills transfer in our country?
Yes. Big boss has spoken. At Sentech, what we do is that if you go to the market and you respond, for example, we had a cybersecurity project that we external people had to respond to. We insisted that 30% should go to an SME. So we do that. And secondly, on my left, is my predecessor. He's one of the beneficiaries of our ESD, and he's doing great and wonderful things because he's done OTT platform for GovTech. So we're not talk people, we deliver. So, and we're very passionate about it. I mean, everybody that's here from Sentech will tell you about it.
Thank you. And in our enterprise and supply development program, once we engage with you, the only thing we ask from you is to create employment. So the SMMEs that we support, they know they've got one deliverable, create employment in their small even if it's just one job, it makes an impact. But from today, I'm sure they will look at relooking at what kind of jobs they will create. Okay, thank you, you've said it. May I take you? You are next, you are next, you are next. Please, let's keep it short.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Gifilwe, I'm from Transcend. By the way, I don't think we've documented everything that we've done as business. Yes. I've participated on a learnership myself. I've been a Yes for Youth beneficiary as well. So what we do at Transcend is we do learnerships for people living with disabilities. So one of the things that we do is we take graduates and we take all the people that are unemployed. We match them to their potential sponsor. So what we do is we ensure that they are in the right field to make sure that they are utilized within the economies or the sectors that they need to operate in. The only challenge, obviously, is distance and not having, enough information. So currently, one of the sectors that we've been tackling is the ICT sector. And well, my advice is in the 2 years that I've spent with Transcend, ICT sector has a specific mandatory to actually spend their SED and their ED in ICT. So I think you should be going to all the ICT companies that have BEE certificates that should be able to make sure that they are able to help you in coding. As a Yes for Youth learner, we use an app on the phone. So this is not really promoted much, but then it's more of a learnership, but we use a cell phone to learn all the modules that we need to be learning. And I think it has, saved a lot of transport costs for a lot of youth, as well as, making sure that we're learning as much as we need to be learning, because I then get to communicate with my supervisor through the phone as well. So I think moving in that direction and using IT more, we could actually achieve more. And we've, I think, registered 15 companies from Transcend perspective, just learning, through the phone and doing the Yes program. So I think ICT could move in that space and utilize that. And it's efficient for most companies as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. By the way, we are a level 2 BBB company. Over to you, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Firstly, to Sis Koleka, in the space of the Commission, I operate in the same space that you do, or a similar other space that you do, which is taking this to your underprivileged children and whatnot. And what I found in that is that in the classrooms, when I'm with the children and we try and engage with the teachers as well, they're not interested. Two, they are intimidated because the learners catch on faster than what they do. And there's this, the minister has said that the curriculum is ready and robotics and coding is going into our public schools. What is the Commission of 4IR doing about who is going to teach? Because even in the private schools, you go to Kuro, they tell you we're using Lego, but the teachers don't know. They just give them the box set. And then somebody must figure it out. They sit there with a manual. If a child asks a question that is beyond what the manual has, the teacher is stressed. So what is this? What is the commission, the President's Commission, doing about this, the teacher space? And lastly, why are we talking about unemployment when we know that the jobs that we are talking about are being phased out? What are we doing to make sure that, this unemployment that we are crying about, we're not just getting people, employing them, and then getting them unemployed again, perpetuating the cycle?
I believe the questions are for the room, and we do not have all the answers now. But you can collaborate with the people in the space you're in, and you can tell us what to do as industry and as drivers of this economy, so that we are on the global route that we were challenged with, to think globally. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. My name is Melody, and I run a company called My Future Work. It's a startup. So we focus actually on upskilling and reskilling for the digital age. So the area that we've identified as a business is upskilling and reskilling of employees. I know that there's a lot of talk, when we're focusing on underprivileged children, we're talking about what's being done in schools. Yes, that area is important, but if we are sitting with an unemployment rate of 29%, and companies are automating their processes, it means that the next report of Stats SA is actually going to be higher than the previous one. And the challenge that we are sitting with, as a business that's upskilling and reskilling for the digital age, is actually the companies themselves. So people come into a room, they talk the big talk, about digital transformation. Hey, we are here for this. And then us, it's true. And then us, the SMMEs, we go into the companies and we say, hey, we've got these particular programs, we've got this and that and that and that available for you for upskilling and reskilling. Then it's like, we are just getting into the conversation. And so, we sit and we're having this conversation about how do we pull in SMMEs to come up with the solutions. We are here. We've got the solutions. We are not here saying, give this to us, give that to us. We are saying, we are here, we've got the solutions, empower us to be able to then get the companies to say, collaborate with us to give the solutions. And so for me, actually, I'm very excited sitting in this room with Sentech and listening to Sentech, that Sentech is ready for digital transformation, because by the time I leave here today, I hope that we are going to have a conversation with the gentlemen over there and the ladies over there about what upskilling and reskilling initiatives do you currently have in your company. And if you don't, then this collaboration needs to happen. Thank you.
Need I say more? It's that.
Disclaimer.
Please continue.
We don't want disclaimers. So I think my comment is to Aphiwe, and we are the millennials, so we keep talking about the millennials. We are here. So I think, Aphiwe, I just want to say that maybe I am over optimistic, I don't know, you need to guide me here. How come we are not, a state of utopia for me, for South Africa specifically, is when innovation outpaces automation? That for me will be, that state of utopia. So when people like yourself, the tech gurus, don't mention innovation, I get very worried, because we will continue to bleed. So we've seen how M-Pesa has totally transformed Kenya. The economy of Kenya has changed just because of M-Pesa. And we need M-Pesa in South Africa, not M-Pesa. We need innovation in South Africa. my last one is to Wanda. Wanda, thank you so much for mentioning what I think we often forget, the third level of the digital divide, and that is being able to teach not only just coding skills and all these skills, but being able to equip our youth with skills that will help them to have tangible outcomes. It's not going to help us that we can all code if we can solve problems. And in South Africa, we are in such a unique, we have unique opportunities because we have unique problems. And how we then, working with coding, working with all these technical solutions, how are we making sure that the unemployed youth are able to use those skills and make them, put food on the table for themselves without looking to be employed?
Yeah, the millennials have spoken. I have to keep to the rules. I have said I will not allow the panel to have their closing remarks. Hello, I'm still in the driver's seat, ladies. Millennials will get you talking. You burning. Are you going to talk about innovation? Okay, I'm joking. Ma'am, talk to me after the session. I will connect you to all other people in Sentech with your initiative. Thank you. And we can take it from there. This gentleman has had his hand first for so long. If I allow anybody to speak, it should be him. I do not think we have time. If I give him a chance, the one behind him wants to speak and the one diagonal to him is dying. And here. So, may I
allow the last gentleman to speak?
Yes, please. Thank you so much. I will allow only you to speak and we shall close the session.
All right. Yes. Thank you very much. Basically, I've even kind of asked her to present my question partially too. Because for me, the issue of employment, I don't know why we're stressing about it. Because it is obvious that we're going to deplete and destroy all these jobs anyway. Because what is coming, whether we like it or not, whether we want to engage with it or not, it is coming. The reality is we need to start thinking differently. The issue, it is not that people are unemployed. People just don't have income. So the question is, how do we then apply ourselves to ensure that every single one of us, including those who do not have means, education, or any other way of making sure that they have income, they also are in a space where they can access income? Now, for me, that's the real question. And the secondary question becomes, what then do we need to acquire as skills? Because we're teaching people a lot of things, but those things, are they relevant? Are they really answering the question? Thank you.
Thank you. I will engage the organizers to give us 2 hours next time. Ne? And I'm sure when we meet again next year, the question will be, what have we done? What have we achieved? Same topic, but what have we done? What have we achieved? Thank you so much for honoring our session. I hope we have engaged and shared a lot. We shall exchange content and collaborate beyond this session. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.